I've been fortunate enough to be able to hang on to this bike for almost a year, which means I've ridden it in all kinds of weather, on all kinds of road and in all kinds of conditions. So I think that gives me some element of qualifications to be able to bring you this long-term review of the Honda Africa Twin CRF1100L DCT.
So let's get on to how the bike rides, and the most obvious place to start is with the DCT gearbox. Now, this is the first bike I had ridden that had the DCT gearbox, and I have to say I wasn't convinced I was going to like it.
I've had quite a few comments on my videos and discussions with riders who say they've ridden an automatic and they didn't like it. But in pretty much all of those conversations, they've been talking about CVT, or constantly variable transmission, which is the type of drives that you'll find in a twist and go scooter or moped.
But the Africa Twin is very different, of course, because it does have a gearbox. It just has two clutches, hence the name dual clutch transmission. The DCT operates the odd and even gear numbers separately, so you get a smooth flow of power without interruption whilst riding. The computer controlled gearbox effectively selects and has ready the next gear, be that up or down. The 2020 onwards bikes have an advantage over the earlier models as they are fitted with an IMU, so this means that the bike can tell how hard it's accelerating or braking, and also if it's leaning and by how much. All of this information helps the bike to change gear at exactly the right moment, and it changes gear incredibly quickly too.
Initially it does feel a bit weird when you ride these bikes because you've got no clutch lever and you've got nothing down there on the foot control, but you soon adjust to it. And the lever that you can see here is actually a parking brake, but when it's not being used, that is far enough away that you're not tempted to grab it. I think the first probably day that I rode it, I come to junctions and my hand would automatically reach out for the clutch lever, but you soon stop doing that. Of course you can still shift manually. There's an automatic manual button on the controls here. If I press that, I'm into manual mode, and then I've got controls on the left hand side here to be able to go up and down a gear. So if I want to go down to second, I click there and up through the gears. It's seamless, it works really well. The first setting you have is drive, and this is set up to short shift, so you notice how quickly it goes through the gears. By 44 miles an hour I'm already in 6th gear, so this is set up for really relaxed cruising and the best fuel economy as well. There is an additional sport mode where the bike holds onto the gears longer and changes down quicker, and within that sport mode there's 3 settings. I've tend to found that Sports 2 is the best balance, so it will hang onto the gears nice and long for me but not too long, and it will change down very quickly. And because this model bike has got an IMU, that takes care of those changes for you. The IMU can sense when the bike is accelerating or braking hard, and the harder you brake, the quicker it will change down gear. And also it's lean sensitive as well, so it will work out what needs to go on. And so far I've not been able to catch this gearbox out, and it's worked perfectly every time. It can shift quicker than I can, and it can shift better than I can. So let's just give you a quick example here. Into a tight left hand bend in 5th gear, if I hard on the brakes, I'm down to 2nd gear ready to come out of the corner, and you can see how it just holds on to those gears much longer. I was going a bit too quick there, apologies for that. But it's been fantastic. There's also an option to have a foot shifter fitted, so if you're in manual mode and you don't want to use the toggles on the hand controls, you can still use a foot control, and this effectively then becomes a quick shifter, but you never have the clutch to worry about. Another benefit of the DCT is the bike is impossible to stall. So I'll show you. If I've got no gas and I'll just rear brake, rear brake, rear brake, rear brake, I'm not touching the gas, and it just changes down the gear for you, no stalling. And that actually comes in pretty handy off-road, particularly for newbies like myself, because when you're tackling tricky terrain, it's just one less thing to have to think about. But I hear the purists say, what about slipping the clutch for control? Well, obviously you can't, but you don't really need to. The throttle map and the fueling on this is nice and gentle, so all that control comes in the right hand. So for slow maneuvers, the throttle is actually very gentle. The fueling and the map on that, particularly if you put it in the normal drive mode, is very soft, not jerky at all. And if you feel like you need to, you can always use a dab of rear brake and use that effectively, like you would do a clutch, just to give some kind of resistance. The only negative thing that I found about the DCT gearbox is you can't just pull the clutch in and blip the throttle. You can't rev bomb it through tunnels, because this Honda does sound lovely, but you can't do that. You don't have the ability, if you're moving like now, even with no throttle, I haven't got the ability to put it into neutral. So obviously if you blip the throttle, it's going to drive the bike forward. But to be honest, that's the only negative I've really found with the system. It works so well, it's just an incredible piece of technology. Okay, so that's probably enough about the DCT now. As you can see, it makes for a very relaxed but also a fun ride. It works faultlessly. I think particularly on this model, the 2020 onwards, which has the IMU, what was already a good DCT system is even better. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but I absolutely love it. It has 100% won me over. And if you want to find out for yourself, just book yourself a test ride, get out on one and give it a go.
Okay, so what's the rest of the bike like in terms of a riding experience? First time I jumped on it, it felt absolutely huge, but you get used to that, and the more I've been riding it, the more it's felt smaller. I started with the seat in the lower of the two positions until I got used to it, but then quickly moved it up into this higher position to give me a little bit more leg room on the pegs.
The bars themselves are nice and wide and high. You've got lots of leverage for control, and they're pretty comfortable. The standing position is good as well. I don't feel that I'm reaching for the bars. There's no need for me to put any risers on these. I think they're set up well. The seat's comfortable as well. I've done long days on this bike and I've had no issues with the seat at all. There are lots of seat options if you want a lower seat or a higher seat. Obviously this one can be put into two different levels, but there are other options out there as well. But given that this bike is set up for long distance touring, I've got no problems with this seat or the riding position in general.
I like the stock short screen on this model, particularly when riding in warm weather, but it can create buffeting depending on what helmet you're riding and of course how tall you are. This can be fixed obviously in the accessory catalogue by fitting this taller touring screen, and I have to say on motorway runs and in poor weather it has proved to be a very good screen.
The ride quality is magic carpet like. It's nice and plush. I really have enjoyed the comfort that it brings. Some reviewers have said that it's too soft, and I can kind of see where they're coming from, but for me, particularly on these kind of roads, I want it to be a little bit more plusher as opposed to really stiff, hard, sporty ride. It's going to be much more comfortable over longer distances and over rough ground. You can adjust it, of course. You've got fully adjustable front forks, and you can wind in preload for the rear shock as well, so you can tailor that. But as far as I'm concerned, the ride quality is lovely. They've found a really good balance with this bike. Personally, I think I can push this bike as hard as I would without ever having to worry about the grip or the suspension or indeed the braking. Obviously you do get a little bit of dive under hard braking, but it's predictable and it's easily controllable.
Talking of grip, the stock Metzeler Karoo street tyres have been excellent. They've got plenty of grip and feel in the cold and the heat. On wet tarmac they've been really good, and on dry tarmac they are much grippier than I thought they would be. Off-road they're only really any good for hard packed dirt or gravel, but they have dealt with some loamy mud pretty well. Once the mud gets deeper and wetter though, they of course do run out of traction. for an all-round dual sport tyre, they have really impressed me. Now, this model runs with tubes in the tyres. I'm not going to be crossing any desert soon, so I would prefer tubeless rims, and you can retrofit the Adventure Sport model rims onto this, but that's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination.
The electronics are abundant on the Africa Twin, but I've never felt that they interfere with the riding at all. There is almost infinite adjustability for those that want it when it comes to engine braking, traction control, wheelie control, rear wheel slip and ABS, etc. So if you like to fiddle, then you'll love this, but I've found that just leaving the settings as they are for each riding mode is more than sufficient. It can be tricky to navigate your way around the electronics to start with, as the controls are not initially the most intuitive. However, with a little bit of practice, they soon become second nature and you don't even think about it. The TFT display is excellent, and I like that Honda have retained a small LCD screen below it. This means you get to use all of the screen real estate for things like GPS navigation, but still see your essential information when riding. The inclusion of Apple CarPlay and now Android Auto is a welcome one, but I do have a couple of gripes about it. To use it, you do need to have your smartphone plugged in. No problem, Honda provide a weather protected USB port by the side of the screen. Excellent. But there is nowhere to store said smartphone, so you do need to invest in some form of mount. I already have a quad lock mount and case, so that's fine, but it is something you need to consider. Also, you have to have some kind of headset connected to the bike for the CarPlay to work. This can be a comms unit fitted in your helmet or just a set of Bluetooth earbuds, but it would be good to have the option to be able to get the CarPlay running without that connection if you just purely want the visual reference. However, there is a workaround that I found. You do have to connect a Bluetooth unit to it initially, but once you've done that, you can hold a button on the control when it asks you to pair, and it will think that it's connecting to that previous unit, when in actual fact it's not. The other option is to just connect it to a pair of Bluetooth earbuds and shove those in your jacket pocket if you don't want to wear them in your helmet. I guess in reality it's a safety feature so that you've got the audio instructions and you're not having to take your eyes off the road, but it would be good to have the option to run CarPlay without going through that connection process. This is probably a good time to talk about accessories, as there are a host of OEM and third-party accessories available, and that list is growing rapidly. The bike comes as stock with these narrow hand guards, and you need to buy the extensions if you want more coverage. I thought this was a bit of a cheek, but actually it does have an advantage. With this system, you can quickly and easily switch between the two. If it's hot and you're riding on the road and want maximum airflow, just pop them off. In winter or off-roading, when you want maximum protection, just pop them on again. The tank pads for me are an essential accessory. They not only look good, but the grip they offer over the shiny panel is well worth the price. The deflectors work well at offering a bit more wind and weather protection, and as I mentioned earlier on, the short screen can cause some buffeting, but you can add the taller touring screen. There is a growing number of aftermarket accessories coming through for the Africa Twin, and if I get the chance I may look at some of those going forward. I have fitted SW Motec Pro side carriers, as I absolutely love these. The carriers themselves can be clipped off and on in no time at all, and the mounts are really discreet. I also use Krieger US bags on the pillion seat, as they are an incredibly flexible system. Look out for a full Krieger US range review coming up soon on the channel.
One problem that owners of the previous model had raised was this area where the forks come up through the bodywork, and that it was leaking air up through here, which was actually creating some buffeting on the helmet. I think this has been fixed. The only time I've ever really noticed it is when I was wearing a peaked helmet, and I can only tell when I switch between having that open and having that covered. There is a solution, of course. A company called Pyramid Plastics have a deflector kit that you can just bolt onto there, and it does work. I have tried it on this with the peaked helmet, and although I didn't think the buffeting was a problem as it was, when I fitted the deflector I could notice the difference between the two, particularly when wearing my showy peaked helmet. So if it is something that you come across, if that is a problem, then Pyramid Plastics are the place to go. And I think for about 25 quid you can get a deflector that bolts into there on the original fixings and takes care of that problem.
Pyramid Plastics also make a fender extender, which will definitely come in useful over the winter. It can be screwed into place. It's not my bike, so I can't do that with this one, or fixed with double-sided sticky pads. I'll leave a link in the description to all these accessories so you can go away and have a look at the ones that I fitted to the bike. Are there any others that I would fit? Well, I would definitely look at a crash bar if I was going to start to venture off-road a little bit more. I'd also like to fit bigger foot pegs. I took the rubber base out of the stock ones as they can be slippery when they get wet. What's left behind is fine, but I'd like them to be a bit more grippy. Again, there are some replacements in the Honda accessory catalogue, and the Enduro pegs look like the ones that I would go for. One thing that did bug me is that the bike doesn't come with a 12-volt power supply. Yes, there is the USB I mentioned earlier, but I have not been able to power any of my heated clothing over the winter because the bike hasn't got a cigarette lighter style 12-volt power supply. You can buy one from the accessory catalogue for £25, but on a bike that is approaching almost £14,000, you would think that that's something that should come as standard. The bike doesn't come with heated grips either, so that is definitely an option that I would fit if this was my motorcycle. I do still think personally this is one of the nicest looking adventure bikes on the market. The Dakar Rally inspired styling really hits the mark for me, and this Grand Prix red colour scheme is very smart indeed.
The fit and finish is superb, and in all the time I've been riding it I've had no problems whatsoever, so it seems that the legacy of the Honda build quality is alive and well with the Africa Twin.
So the question is, have I fallen in love with this bike? There are faster adventure bikes out there, there are lighter adventure bikes out there, there are some bikes that excel in the rough and in the dirt, there are some bikes that excel on the tarmac, but for me I think the Africa Twin hits the sweet spot for all of those. Now of course I'm talking about myself because of the type of riding I do, these sort of country lanes, predominantly tarmac, but I do some light off-roading. I ride in the rain, I ride in the cold, I ride in the sunshine, and this bike just seems to do everything very well. You know, I can come out and explore around the country lanes here, I can load it up with luggage and go blatting across Europe if I want to, no problems at all. It just fits the bill for me. So have I fallen in love with it? And the answer is yes, I have. 100% I have fallen in love with this. The fact that I've actually affectionately referred to this as Big Red, and I'm not the sort of person that ever gives bikes names, maybe a shitbag if they won't start, but I never give bikes names, and this one has tugged at my heartstrings, and it will be a very difficult bike to hand back at the end of the loan. I have to admit I will be sad to see it go. I will have to be careful. The Missenden Flyer fell in love with a Goldwing press bike and ended up buying it. Richie Vida fell in love with an Africa Twin Adventure Sports press bike and he ended up buying it. So the curse of the Honda press bike is very strong. My only saving grace is that my bank account is pretty empty. I've thoroughly enjoyed riding it. It's comfortable, it's quick, I think it looks fantastic, it's very capable and it's very practical. At just over £13,900, this base level CRF1100L with DCT is not necessarily a cheap bike, but I think it's fairly well priced considering the build quality and what you get with it, not forgiving obviously the small little bits like the 12-volt thing that I've already complained about. Overall it's a fantastic package. In terms of running costs, well, I've been averaging something like, and I should be able to tell you on the screen here, 53 miles per gallon, which is not bad for a big 1100, and I've been riding it in sports mode for most of the time that I've had it, so I can live with that fuel economy. Obviously I've not had to insure the bike or service the bike, so I'll have a chat to my local Honda dealer and get an idea of the servicing costs.
Actually, I did notice when I looked online that if you're buying a bike on finance, Honda will give you your first 3 services complimentary, and they'll also throw in a 3-year extended guarantee and roadside coverage. If you're not buying it on finance or you already own the bike, then you can buy a service plan and get 3 services for £675.
There are those people that say Hondas are dull and boring. That may be the case to some people, but I would say this bike is anything but dull and boring. It sounds great. It goes well. It's comfortable. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love this bike.
I will definitely miss this bike when it goes back. It's been a fun, dependable and practical partner. Maybe it's the DCT gearbox that sets this bike apart from other adventure bikes that I've ridden. It's not the only thing, but it's certainly a contributory factor. If you have any questions about the bike, or if there's something that you think that I've missed, then drop them in the comments section down below. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Honda Motorcycles UK for the extended loan of the Africa Twin. It is very much appreciated. If you like the video, then a thumbs up is appreciated, and if it's your first time here and you like what I'm doing, hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell would be greatly appreciated. And all that leaves me to say is, until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.